Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and we welcome you to the forum. And in behalf of the Kennedy School of Government and the Institute of Politics, the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies, the Students for Peace and Vescus, and welcome to the forum. And all of us are joining here tonight to be a part of our next to the last forum of this academic year. And we know that tonight we have a very, very timely subject. Before I get into that subject, I would like to ask if our good friend, the former governor, Pedro Rosell and Mrs. Rosell, I think they're in the audience, but I don't know where. Oh, there they are, right back here. Thank you very, very much, Governor and Naga. Thank you so much. Well, we joined tonight for a very different type of forum, to look at a country, an area of our world that is not widely understood, maybe. Unless you have visited this beautiful island in the Caribbean as a tourist, or maybe have a family on the island, it is likely that your knowledge of Puerto Rico might be limited. In fact, I would hate to ask all Americans to identify where Puerto Rico is on the map or on the globe. I'm afraid many might not pass that exam too readily. But many of us now know what those issues are about this land, that we take our politics very seriously in Puerto Rico, we hear. I know in Arkansas we have folks who both love and hate Bill Clinton, who are staunch Democrats and staunch Republicans. We have some in Puerto Rico who also have like feelings about their various political philosophies. Tonight, that's what the forum is all about, to allow people to come together that might have different viewpoints and to share those viewpoints and to be civil in those expressions and to try to put for a few moments yourself in the shoes of others. Some believe that the destiny of Puerto Rico is statehood. Others do not. Some believe it should be maybe even an independent nation. Some say, let's keep it as a commonwealth. But tonight we have found one issue that is a common ground, and that is the subject of the U.S. Navy bombing in that region. Tonight we have the honor of being joined by representatives of the major parties in Puerto Rico, Senator Roberto Pratz, Senator Miriam Ramirez, Dr. Ramirez, I think I should say, I've known for some time, and Senator Manuel Rodriguez. I'm not doing very well with these pronunciations. It's my Arkansas accent, and I apologize. Before I turn the floor over, I would, for our distinguished moderator this evening, who I will introduce, let me present, if I could, Hans Pearl Mantanzo. Is that, who is here? Thank you for helping us arrange this. And Hector Bladel Rosado, is that you? Thank you so much, Hector, for being here tonight and for helping us arrange this program. Tonight, Professor Eileen de los Reyes is going to be our moderator. She's going to keep time. She's going to keep our speakers basically within the time frame, and also she will disallow any questions that look like might be accompanied by a brick, bat, or a rock or something like that being thrown. So we're going to keep this very civil, and we're going to keep it very gentlemanly, lady and gentlemanly, I should say, and we're honored tonight that Eileen, who has a PhD from MIT, is an expert in Latin American politics and international relations. She's been researching how to improve the education of Latino students in the Boston middle schools, and she is, of course, with Harvard University's Graduate School of Education. Eileen, if you would take over our program. Thank you very much.
Buenas noches. Good evening. I want to introduce briefly the subject of the panel, and then I'll introduce our distinguished speakers. Puerto Rico is contested political terrain. This may be the understatement of the century plus 3 years. When I speak of contested terrain, it may sound as if I'm speaking of a geographical location, islands in the middle of the Caribbean. Of course, I'm speaking of a nation, the Puerto Rican people. The dialogue this evening is about land and people. The two converge in a dialogue about the status of Puerto Rico. Now, more than ever, the situation in Vieques requires that we continue our struggle to understand, analyze, and take action. This panel of distinguished Puerto Rican senators give us the opportunity to speak with each other, to ask questions, and to take actions. I am honored to introduce Senator Roberto L. Pratz Palermo. At the age of 34, Senator Pratz is one of the youngest members of the Senate of Puerto Rico ever elected to such high office, and certainly the youngest to ever chair the prestigious Government Affairs and Public Safety Committee. Roberto Pratz is a member of the Popular Democratic Party, also known as the Commonwealth Party, el Partido Popular. Pratz is also the Vice Chairman of the Committee for Economic Development, Commerce and Technology, and of the Committee of Government Ethics. He's also a member of the Ways and Means Committee, Judiciary Committee, International Relations and Federal Affairs, and the Committee on Municipal Governments, Urban Affairs, and Public Corporations. Senator Pratz Palermo went to Cornell University, where he obtained a bachelor's degree in policy analysis in 1990. He also studied environmental and international law at Georgetown University School of Law. In 1994, Pratz became an attorney upon graduating from the Inter-American University. Senator Miriam J. Ramirez is Senator at Large for the New Progressive Party, former member of the State Medical Board of Puerto Rico, member of the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Services, member of the United States delegation to the 1989 San Salvador elections, and spokesperson for the Support Our Troops Committee in Puerto Rico during the Gulf War. Senator Ramirez is licensed to practice medicine as general practitioner, an obstetrician and gynecologist. She went to the medical school at the University of Madrid. Manuel Rodriguez Orellana is a former senator and minority leader for the Puerto Rican Independence Party. He is currently the Secretary of North American Relations for the Partido Independentista. He was electoral commissioner for the Puerto Rican Independence Party. Rodriguez Orellana was a professor of law at the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico until he was elected to serve in the Senate in Puerto Rico. He has degrees from the Harvard Law School, Boston College, Brown University, and the Johns Hopkins University. Please join me in welcoming this distinguished panelist. The process will be to have each panelist speak for 10 minutes, and 10 minutes, more or less. And then we will open for questions and answers. Senator Pratz.
Buenas noches. Well, first and foremost, let me thank Harvard University for this wonderful and perhaps unforgettable experience to be addressing one of the world's premier arena for political discussion. And I want to give my respects to the governor, former governor of Puerto Rico, and the First Lady, and my distinguished colleagues, Dr. Ramirez and my friend, Manuel Rodriguez Orellana. Many of you have attended similar forums on the political status of Puerto Rico. And as opposed to reenacting for you a three-ring circus, I propose to my colleagues not to rehash what has been amply debated about the diverse views we may have on the political status of Puerto Rico. We should ask ourselves what recent developments are coming out of Puerto Rico that may hinder further debate on the future relations between Puerto Rico and the United States. The quest for peace in Vieques must come to mind. First, let me lay out some premises on Vieques and the perennial controversy regarding the political status of Puerto Rico. It is an uncontested fact that the people in Puerto Rico are sharply divided on the status issue. We have been for many years. A reconciliation on our contrasting views is not foreseeable in the near future. So when we deal with the status and Vieques simultaneously, we must ask ourselves if we want to transfer the divisiveness of the status issue to the conflict in the island of Vieques. If we do, then we must ask ourselves if we can prevail against the preponderance of the U.S. Navy if our people are divided. And if we do, we must ask ourselves, who are we better serving, the people of Puerto Rico or the U.S. Navy? The presence of the U.S. Navy, although it is unquestionably rooted in our political relationship with the United States, it is not a gateway to find a final solution to our status dilemma. Let there be no doubt that the Navy is way past its expiration date in Puerto Rico. We have passed the point of no return, for there are 9,000 American citizens in Vieques suffering and paying the high price of the bombing with their health and with their damaged quality of life. Our collective goal as a country is to bring peace to the people of Vieques and uphold our fundamental right to a decent quality of life. But in order to succeed in this struggle for justice, we must have a united front that should not be jeopardized with a status deviation. The stakes are too high to risk the unity of purpose of the people of Puerto Rico. There is no doubt that Vieques has united our people. There are obviously differences of opinion on the issue. For example, there have been people in Puerto Rico that have suggested that we should remove the people from Vieques and leave Vieques for the Navy to continue what they have been doing for the past 60 years. There have been people that have stated that we should tackle status and Vieques simultaneously. But I say this, if Puerto Rico were to be an independent republic today, the quest for peace and the outcry for justice will be the same. If Puerto Rico were to be a state today, the quest for peace will remain unaltered. As a Commonwealth, our government has exercised a firmly rooted American tradition of seeking redress for grievances and protecting inalienable rights under our judicial and legal system. 2 weeks ago, we took the U.S. Navy to court. And we are not seeking a protection or a fundamental right that is not afforded or unrecognized to other American citizens. We are asking for the same protection under our common body of law. No more, no less. Just like the state of Virginia, recently 500 residents near Chesapeake Bay filed a suit against the U.S. Navy because they were damaging their quality of life. We now know many things that we did not know before regarding Vieques. First, irreparable environmental damage resulting from 60 years of constant bombing with, among other things, toxic and deadly chemicals and weapons. Markedly higher cancer rates among our local population. Alarming scientific findings by the medical community that show abnormalities in the heart of 98% of the fishermen that were sampled. Potential damage to the lungs of the children from a new body pathology called vibroacoustic disease. These are serious, very serious health threats that warrant action now, not later. And given the overwhelming scientific evidence that have been set forth, the prudent thing to do was to halt all military practice until all medical studies were concluded. The Navy's irresponsible response has been that they will continue bombing and will conduct the studies later. One of the main lessons that have to be learned from the Vieques experience
is that, generally speaking, Puerto Ricans and Americans have very different ways of looking at issues. Vieques is a vivid example of a failure to understand by the United States government the scales of value of the Puerto Rican people. Another important lesson from Vieques is that congressional representation in Congress would not have altered in any significant manner the current situation. Over 60 members of Congress and 10 senators have asked the president to stop the bombing, to no avail. In fact, it took the state of Hawaii, with their 2 senators and their representatives, over 30 years to stop their practices in Hawaii. What political implications does Vieques have for the final resolve of our political status dilemma? I guess only time will tell. But I know this. As we begin to move forward in finding a way to close this sad chapter in our history, and we begin to find ways of reopening status discussion with the U.S. Congress and the White House, our newly elected government of Puerto Rico will not accept quid pro quos of status enhancements in exchange of the continuation of the bombing by the U.S. Navy. Vieques is Vieques, status is status. And to finalize, I ask you to do this. Imagine for a moment that you live in a small island, a beautiful island off the mainland, where 75% of the island is not accessible to you because it's occupied by the U.S. Navy. It's occupied because they're bombing, and they've been bombing for 60 years. The house where your grandfather lived is now occupied also by the Navy. For 60 years, the Navy have bombed the island from airplanes, from jets, from ships, amphibious landing. All of a sudden, people are getting sick. Some people are dying. Nobody knows exactly why. But the Navy is saying, trust us. We will conduct the studies later. For 60 years, you have trusted the Navy, and all you've gotten in return is squalor and diseases. Now imagine that that island is called Martha's Vineyard, perhaps Nantucket. Will you allow this to continue? While in Puerto Rico, we remain strongly committed to national security of the United States, and we will continue to honor our common defense with valor and courage. Tolerating the gross violation of our fundamental rights to peace and a decent quality of life is a price we are not willing to pay. Let us not confuse commitment with injustice and honor with tolerance. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening. It's also a great, immense pleasure for me to be here. This is the first time I'm here in Harvard. I walked around the city and I saw the beautiful grounds you have here, and I feel very excited and very proud to have been invited to participate today in this panel. And I was particularly excited because I knew Senator Pryor from way back when he was a senator in Congress. And at the time, he was fighting against drug prices, because drug prices in Puerto Rico, well, all over the world, had gone up really high. And drug companies were getting tax exemption, and they were getting a clean sweep of money, you know, and hurting the people, the older people who have to use more medication. And I went up to Washington and I agreed with him, and he proved to be right after all. He got a lot of flack when he brought the issue up, because these were the big corporations who don't pay taxes but are doing business in Puerto Rico. And he was brave enough to bring it up, and I felt very proud to stand by him on that issue. And from then on, I got the backbone to fight, you know, big companies and big corporations who really have a very vested interest in all these issues in Puerto Rico. And you know, it's funny because I have been basically I belonged to the civil groups all during my so-called political career. This is the first time I'm here as a politician. So I don't really belong in the political arena. I've just been elected for 3 months. And most of my activities regarding Puerto Rico status and Puerto Rico issues have been actually in the civil group. And listening to my colleagues and knowing that you're very interested in this Vieques issue, I'm wondering if you've heard all the stories about Vieques. First of all, yes, of course, we're very concerned about the fact that there was an accident and that a security guard was killed during the training purposes. But for example, are you aware of the fact that our former governor, our past administration, addressed this issue and spoke civilly to the United States government, sat down with President Clinton, sat down with Congress, and determined a process by which the people of Vieques would be able to vote and empower themselves on how they wanted to work it out with the Navy? And if the people of Vieques want the Navy out of Puerto Rico, they would be gone by the year 2003? And why 2003 and not right away? It makes sense. Here we have military training that is taking place, like they've said, for about 40 or 50 years, which, by the way, was actually begun and the lands were transferred during the administration of the Popular Party. But this has been going on for a long time. There's an immense investment there. According to the Defense Department, basically the place cannot be replaced. They actually say anywhere in the world. But assuming there might be a place where it be replaced, you can't replace that in 5 days. Let's be honest about it. Every time we send young men and women to fight overseas somewhere, they need to be trained. You can't stop training just because an issue has come up in the last 60 years. It has come up right now. So the governor of Puerto Rico, he went over, he spoke to Clinton, he spoke to the Congress, and they came up with an agreement that was reasonable and good for everybody in Puerto Rico. The people of Puerto Rico, of Vieques, received it. The United States citizens of Vieques received it kindly. And the agreement included that the Navy could continue training with inert bombs. These are bombs that have no explosive. So what happens is, when the training continues, the present government of Puerto Rico, they want the Navy to stop training immediately. They want that stopped immediately. And what has happened because of that fact? That protesters have gone to the fences where the Navy is training. They have broken the fences. They have tried to invade the lands, and they have created the violent scenes that you have seen probably all over the United States. But did you know, for example, that the citizens of Vieques, the United States citizens of Vieques, there are 9,000 people there, that they have already collected over 4,000 petitions individually signed, saying that they want to negotiate with the Navy directly, that they're not happy with these protests and with these things that are happening? Did you know that out of 170 people who were arrested, there's only about 4 or 5 who are people from Vieques? Do you know that this island is about maybe 10 miles long or something like that, or maybe 12? And that the distance from the training, actual training, which is about 3% of the land owned by Vieques, is about 8 miles from the housing area where the Viequenses live? And that they could just walk over to the Camp Garcia fences, and there was no manifestation by the people of Vieques during the training? How do you explain that? How do you explain all the scenes that you've seen and only 4 people from Vieques have been actually arrested in that? How do you explain the fact that the people of Vieques who live in Vieques, the citizens of Vieques, feel intimidated, are under a stage of siege? They have, in their streets, they have spikes of nails so that their tires can get punctured, that they have their windows of the cars broken, that they throw stones in their houses if they say that they are somehow pro-Navy. I mean, this is really a very sad situation for the people who actually live in Vieques, for the citizens of Vieques. Those people who have been doing the manifestations and the protest, these are people, you see things like that in the United States, but you see people protesting with a U.S. flag. You see people protesting, reclaiming their constitutional rights as citizens. What do these people do? They burn the flag, they scream, "Yankee, go home." So that this is not a status issue? Can anybody believe that this is not a status issue? They throw rocks at the young men in the Navy. You know, back home, nobody saw the wounded Navy people, but I think some of you who saw CNN saw some of the people from the Navy with, I mean, these are young men and women that probably many of you already know. I mean, why should we support that when there was already an agreement that this thing was going to be done civilly, that it was going to be done accordingly. Why should these things be happening in Puerto Rico? Now, you hear all of a sudden the pro-independence sector who have joined forces with the Commonwealth Party screaming and hollering that this is a civil rights issue. God, civil rights issue? What about the civil rights issue that we're U.S. citizens and we can't vote for the president? Now, isn't that a civil rights issue? Isn't it a civil rights issue that we don't have any members in Congress? Now, isn't that a civil rights? Have you ever heard any of these guys fighting about that? They're very happy not voting for the president. Can you believe a nation with citizens that can't vote for the maximum leader of that country? Can you believe that? That we have to send lobbyists and our governor almost in a begging way to talk to the president so that we can get some action in Puerto Rico? Do you know that when Congress makes a law, they say, oh, listen, we're going to pass a law and we're going to send millions of dollars to the states, to the several states, that's the usual language, several states, to make sure that the roads are good. And then you have a resident commissioner come up, say, hey, Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico. Oh, Puerto Rico. Oh, yeah, Puerto Rico. Send him $100,000. Okay, now don't you think we ought to be fighting all together for that? Now they say the status issue divides us. No, the parties divide us. Because did you know that 95% want to keep united to the United States permanently? You can ask my colleague. Do you know that 95% wants to keep U.S. citizenship? You can ask my colleague. So what are we fighting about? I mean, what happens if all of a sudden, you've been through recent Cold War, some of the older ones like me. What would have happened if instead of the Soviet Union, staunch enemies of the United States, had not sat down in the United Nations and talked? That's what our governor did. And I feel proud to see him there, and you don't know how much we love him in Puerto Rico because he was a sensible man, and I am so proud to see him there, I'm sorry. But he did what was right. He went over to Washington, and he spoke on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico and the citizens of Puerto Rico, and he got an agreement that was good for the citizens of Vieques. You know that this is the first time in history that citizens who are not empowered by Congress can make a decision on a federal issue. This is the first time in history. Can you imagine this situation for the citizens of Vieques? They are going to be able to make a decision on whether they want the Navy to stay in, and that is in place. The referendum is in place. The agreement was that they would train until this referendum is over, and now we have all these scenes and all these violence. The people of Vieques, their quality of life has diminished because of what's happening in Vieques. And the present administration is encouraging this, sending people out there to protest, giving government facilities to do that, sending boats and things so people can go out there and do that. This is actually what's happening in Vieques. And I'm hoping that someday they will join us and try to get our civil rights as we should, as U.S. citizens. Or make a decision and let's just go somewhere else. But we can't continue in this halfway situation. Thank you.
Paz para Vieques. It is an honor to be here. It is always a pleasure to share the podium with my friends here from Puerto Rico. But it is a particular honor because initially the presidents of the three parties had been invited to attend. I am honored to be here, and I'm reminded of the words of Henry Thoreau a long time ago, that when a government indiscriminately imprisons just men, the place to be for a just man is in prison. I'm here on behalf of President Rubén Berrío. I'm here on behalf of the honorary president of the Socialist International, which is the largest association of social democratic political parties in the world, and includes most of Western European social democratic parties currently in power and friendly to the United States. He is, together with Pierre Mauroy and Shimon Peres of France and Israel, respectively, the honorary president of that organization. And I'm honored also that he's the president of my party. It is also a pleasure to be here because we need to talk about these things. We need the intellectual honesty that Harvard is a forum for. We can't hide what we would want under the rug of pretenses. I notice that my dear friend, Senator Pratz, has an inverse Pavlovian reaction to any time that a situation arises in which we Puerto Ricans can claim our full democratic rights and our sovereign powers. And he flies away from that. That's not the issue, he says. And Senator Ramirez, unfortunately, has placed the issue in such a way that if you are pro-Vieques, you are anti-American. What about being pro-Puerto Rican? I know that if she were Norwegian, she would want Norway to be a state. Because, you know, after all, I mean, anybody who is not an American is almost subhuman in this type of thinking. And that is not an ideology, that is a state of mind. And I think we need to debate ideological issues. What we're talking about here is not a conflict between a local community and the US government. What we're talking about here is a confrontation between a people with a separate and distinct nationality and an abusive policy of the US government carried out by the US Navy and their friends in the federal court in Puerto Rico. What we're talking about here goes to the heart of our colonial problem in Puerto Rico. Unquestionably, we do not have the powers to tell the Navy to stop. We do not have the juridical powers. We do not have the weapons, except one, that the Navy can't cope with, and that is moral force. The fact is that the people of Puerto Rico, of which Vieques is an integral part, have been consulted over and over again and have expressed themselves over and over again about what they want to happen in Vieques. Not one more bomb. And that was the main campaign issue in the last election. That is why Mrs. Ramirez's party lost. The combined vote of the Independence Party and the Popular Democratic Party was over 50%, where the main issue, which the incumbent governor embraced a bit late, but finally she did, during the campaign of Peace for Vieques, got over 50% of the vote. The fact is that in Vieques, their combined votes were over 66% of the vote. The fact is that in the mayoral election, and by the way, the mayor of Vieques, a member of Senator Pratz's party, was also arrested and imprisoned last weekend for civil disobedience in Vieques. The fact is that it was over 75% of the vote. And I know that Governor Rosselló, with the best of intentions and with a lot of courage, when he confronted the Congress, said, not one more bomb. And he asked the Congress, and he told congressmen, don't push it. But unfortunately, they pushed him. And he fell. And unfortunately, what is called an agreement is nothing but a directive which has the force of law and which was later enacted into law, and it is a sham of a parody of democracy. The people of Vieques are being asked, do you want to be bombed lightly, or do you want to be bombed like we want to bomb? Do you want to be bombed for 3 years, or do you want to be bombed forever? It's like the judge asking in a spousal beating case, do you want your husband to beat you with the palm of his hand or with a baseball bat? He'll stop in 3 years, or you can choose if you want him to go on forever. Agreements are not the stuff that laws are made of, especially laws that are imposed on a people, like U.S. citizenship on Puerto Ricans in 1917. And since then, there hasn't been as wide a consensus from the three parties in Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, Senator Ramirez does not belong to that consensus, and that is her right. It's sort of like Tom Green exercising his constitutional rights, disguised himself as Hitler and went to a bar mitzvah. But the fact is that the consensus is there from all quarters in Puerto Rico, religious organizations, Catholic and Protestant, civic leaders, labor leaders. And the fact is that the ones that are firing and the ones that are bombing are the Americans in the Navy and not the Puerto Ricans. We have many more data. Senator Pratz mentioned some of the data. We know of the bomb that killed David Sanes. We know of many other near misses. A bomb exploded about a mile away from the main populated area of Vieques a few years ago. Fortunately, it was a mile away. Unfortunately, it was 10 miles off target. So things happen. Until when are we going to allow this? This is not an issue or a struggle that started a couple of years ago. This has been a struggle that has been going on for decades. It's only that we're dealing with the straw that broke the camel's back. We are talking here about what Puerto Ricans will want, and we are facing the utmost denial of democracy. This is an issue of confrontation between democracy and tyranny. This is an issue of confrontation between a people who have decided that they will no longer sit permanently in the back of the bus and the U.S. Navy. This is an issue of full democratic rights. You cannot say that there is anything such as inert ammunition. There may be inert bombs. They don't explode, but if they hit you, they'll kill you just the same. If you shoot a gun, anywhere from a .22 to one of the cannons that they pummel the island with, those are inert bombs, inert weapons, because the explosion takes place in the chamber, not in the bullet that hits. This is a problem of when we are going to stand up and demand the equality as human beings that we as a people have a right to under the sun. This is a quest for dignity and self-respect. And Vieques is Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is Vieques. And in this struggle, the success of the Puerto Rican people is the success of democracy. With your help, I know we can do it. I ask for your help. Thank you.
Good, I see you already know where the microphones are. This is what I want to ask. Could you identify yourself and ask a brief question? And we want to have as many questions as possible. So if we can refrain from making long statements, that would be wonderful. I will be muy cariñosa pero firme, very gentle but firm in saying, if things go on, what is your question? Is that okay? Good? And we'll go one and one.
Y arriba también.
Arriba también, ¿en dónde?
No soy invisible.
Ya, no, sorry, I now saw you. So there's a mic up there. Is there another one? Excelente, I see everyone.
Okay.
So we'll start here.
My name is Raj Lal. I'm a mid-career program at Kennedy School. I have understood some issues from the healthcare standpoint because I come from healthcare. And Senator, you brought up the issue about Martha Vineyard. And if you look at the island, it's 33,000 acres. The American Navy has given already Puerto Rican 20,000. Their training ground is only 900 acres left. And it is true that the last house is 9 miles away. If American Navy wasn't there, Vieques would had all kind of, because I think what you're talking about, tranquility of life and everything else, there have been a real estate development, there may be a commercialization, there may be casinos, and whatever all these things bring with the life that deteriorates at the same time. I understand your one hand, you want to remain the part of the United States, but on the other hand, Navy has only conducting these exercises, as I gather now, since Governor Rosillo has made the arrangements only twice and thrice a year, only a couple of weeks. So why not Vieques people can, according to Governor Rosillo, have participate in that process? As I gather, the hotel industry, the restaurant industry is suffering in Vieques. The tourism rate is down.
So we have a question.
Question is, let the process occur as occurring.
And you're asking?
I'm
Senator
asking, yeah.
Pratz.
The two other gentlemen, one on the extreme right, one on the extreme left.
Excellent.
The question is, if you're talking on one hand to have a freedom, either you want a freedom or you want a statehood, or if you want to remain it, then let us go like everybody else does.
Excellent.
That is a question. You know the question.
Okay.
Well, there were many issues that were brought up in that quite complicated and question. First of all, let me say this. There are many scientific findings that we know now that we did not know when the agreement occurred. It's like any other war that happens that U.S. gets involved, the Persian Gulf, and other conflicts thereafter. After the war, scientific community comes in and they begin to discover all sorts of diseases and scientific findings. That is the case in Vieques. After the agreement, we had scientific community going into Vieques. They were conducting echocardiograms, they were conducting all sorts of studies, and we begin to develop new data that we did not know at the moment of the agreement. The point is that after we know with certainty or reasonable certainty that the people in Vieques are suffering, that people have cancer 3 times as much as in the island, that there's a new body pathology called vibroacoustic disease that is generated by the constant bombing in Vieques. The responsible thing to do for the Navy was to say, okay, there is an issue here, there's some medical evidence, we need to contest it. And the right thing to do was to hire medical experts, go to Vieques and try to contest the medical evidence that was presented by the government of Puerto Rico. But they didn't do that. They decided to go on with their military practices in spite of the fact that they knew or had reason to know that what they were doing was damaging the people in Vieques. And that's why I think it is time for them to stop, and the responsible thing to do prior to the referendum that will take place in November. The right thing to do is to stop the bombing and do the responsible thing, which is to conduct their studies.
Let me just briefly add that I think that in fact, one of the major studies that was conducted during the 362 days that the president of my party spent as a human shield in the firing range in Vieques. And it was conducted by the Puerto Rican Independence Party using a similar methodology as is used by the federal government for soil, plants, and water and air. And it was on the basis of those reports, which were incorporated into a commission that was appointed by Governor Rosselló to study the situation in Vieques, that commission, composed of a wide variety of people from all three parties, and led by then Secretary of State, now Senator and Vice President of the statehood party, Norma Burgos, who, by the way, was also imprisoned for civil disobedience last weekend. It was on the basis of that the conclusion was to demand the immediate and permanent cessation of all military activity in Vieques. If on top of that, you have some studies, whether they be conclusive or not, that raise the possibility that there may be even greater damage, then the shoe goes on the other foot. It is the Navy that has to stop until they can prove otherwise. Aside from that, there is a democratic issue here that needs to be addressed and that no study can address, and that is that the people who live there are tired of this. I want the development of Vieques, the economic development of Vieques, but it shouldn't be at the cost of having your backyard bombed.
You know, I want to address the health issue. I'm sorry, because I'm the only doctor here. They're both attorneys, so I feel with a little bit more power to address that issue. First of all, they bring up the cancer issue. They're talking about some 25 or 30% more, but we're talking numbers like 9,000 population against 4 million in the island. We're talking maybe 2 cases more, producing the 33 or 25%. We're talking this vibroacoustic disease that they've come up with now. This is a Portuguese doctor who did a paper up there in an airport or airplane factory. And of course, you know, I mean, if there is something, I'm the first one to be concerned. I have visited Vieques. I've spoken to the people there. I took a group of 12 students and asked the people what the problems were the same day that his president took off on a little boat out there and spent a year out there getting a salary from the Senate. And the people were not talking health. They were talking, you know, we'd like to get better transportation to the island and whatever. This vibroacoustic disease, the Johns Hopkins University studied all the documents and all the papers produced, and they have found no linkage of this disease to the Navy training in Vieques. And this is, you can verify this with Johns Hopkins. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned. I'm concerned to make sure that the people of Vieques are taken care of, the citizens in Vieques. But this is not the agenda for, these people are using this as an excuse. The agenda, I went to Vieques with the American flags and I was almost killed. I was mobbed. And the pro-independence sector was saying I was provoking because I had the US flag waving in Vieques, okay?
One of the things that I think doesn't ever get discussed, and there's thousands of times that people will talk about the issue of Vieques and everything. And even though Senator Pratz brings up the issue of quality of life, I'd like to ask him, for the past, probably like 60 years, your party has governed the majority of the time in the governorship. And during that time, your party basically did nothing, neither in the legislature nor neither in the governorship, to try to change the situation in Vieques. You knew this was going on for many, many years. And now you bring this up. And in terms of quality of life of Vieques, the people there live overwhelmingly in poverty. The very few jobs that they get, normally they get at Navy-related jobs. The Navy provides health care because they transport people who are ill to the U.S. mainland because there's basically no hospitals there. And my question is, you brought together a proposal where you were, well, not necessarily you, but the commission and supported by your party, whereby there would be all these like tourism resorts that would come to the island once the Navy left. But my question is, how is this going to happen if you also claim on the other side that there's radioactivity? I don't really see, $200 million resorts moving to the island of Vieques if the waters are radioactive. And I wonder, what is the economic development plan for these people? Because these people aren't even given, they're not even being given the right to vote. Like just recently, the Independence Party suggested in Puerto Rico.
We do have the question, right?
Okay, I asked my question already, but I just want to finish the point. But basically, my question is, what is the economic development strategy here?
Well,
and hold on, I just want to finish this comment that I do not understand why I do not understand why the Independence Party would recently come out and say, you know, the referendum in Vieques shouldn't be done, and it should be done for all of Puerto Rico, when this is an issue that affects the community of Vieques.
Okay.
It's an issue that affects the community of Vieques.
Good.
And-
Let's have the questions brief,
Well,
responses brief to see if we can.
I remember at the beginning of this forum, they said that the question would be loaded. They were right. First of all, let me address the issue of the contamination in Vieques. My position is simple. If they have the money to bomb, they should find the money to clean. It's that simple for the Navy. Second, I agree with the premise of your question that not much was done for Vieques by the administrations of my party and the administration of the other parties. The truth of the matter is that the death of David Sanes was like a time bomb that was waiting to explode in the conscience of every Puerto Rican. But we cannot look back to refrain from doing things for the future, and everybody in Puerto Rico is united, and we should take advantage of our unity and just move forward steadily so that we can assure the people of Vieques that they will no longer be subjected to the constant bombing they have been subjected for 60 years. That is basically the situation. Obviously, there are many other issues that can be brought about with regards to the status issue, but there is no doubt that every time we get involved in the status discussion, the people in Puerto Rico get divided. And we should ask ourselves, is that division should be included in the debate of Vieques? And I don't think it should, because if we do, we're going to be divided, and that's going to prevail is the Navy, because they're united. They have a very common cause, and we have a common cause. We have different approaches, different strategies. The doctor, for example, have suggested that we should remove the people from Vieques and just let the Navy bomb. And I think that's wrong.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
No.
And,
I said-
and the truth of the matter is that, you know, being the only doctor in the Senate, perhaps you should be helping us with the medical studies as opposed to be encouraging the Navy to continue bombing.
Let's take another question right there.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Lorenzo Antonio Rosselló. No soy familia del Pitiyanqui allá abajo, gobernador, exgobernador, para aclararlo por segunda vez. Pero sí
Please
quiero,
ask questions.
la pregunta es, aquí se graduó un puertorriqueño en el 1921 llamado Pedro Albizu Campos. Y él decía que la presencia militar norteamericana en Puerto Rico no protegía a los puertorriqueños, sino era una agresión imperial contra nosotros. Y es la pregunta, ¿la presencia militar en Vieques o en Puerto Rico una protección a nosotros o es una agresión contra el pueblo puertorriqueño?
¿Para quién es la pregunta? Who are you asking?
Para todos, para todos. Atan Albizu.
First of all, I want to say that he's wrong when he said the people should be moved out and the island bombed. That was a low blow, my friend. I said if the island is so contaminated and so dangerous, it would be responsible for the governor of Puerto Rico to provide alternate housing until the studies are done. That's what I said. I don't believe it's really a place that is inhabitable, but if she is so strong about her position about how dangerous it is to live there, I think she should provide alternate housing like she did one time in another area of Puerto Rico that people were moved out. Later it was discovered that there wasn't wrong with it. You know, what he said now, I don't know how many of you understood it because he said it in Spanish. Is there anybody here who would like to hear the question in English?
Yo puedo traducirme yo mismo. Soy
Okay.
Could you
vivido aquí.
translate?
Yes, I explained that in Harvard in 1921 there was a Puerto Rican named Pedro Albizu Campos who graduated from Harvard School of Law, the first one. He debated that the presence of the U.S. military in Puerto Rico was an aggression to our people and not a protectorate as it has been stated by time. And then my question to them, who are they protecting in Puerto Rico or in Vieques?
Okay.
Is it an aggression or a protection to us?
Okay, I'm ready. You are right at the point. This is why we're saying that the issue of Vieques has another agenda. the agenda carried by those who don't want the U.S. presence there and the U.S. military presence there. And that was also said by the president of his party in a hearing in 1989 at the Committee of Energy and Natural Resources. This is the whole issue. He has just said it. Now I'm saying, fine, let's have a vote. Come on, let's have a vote. If we want the United States to be in Puerto Rico, let's vote. And if they can get past their he's claiming that we lost the last election because of the Vieques issue. How about him? They did his campaign on Vieques. And they used to put all of Puerto Rico with Ruben and putting the Vieques issue. They got 3%. Was it 4? I mean, God, they were expecting 10%. And they got 3%. What is he talking about, losing votes because of the Vieques issue? Let's have a vote, you guys. Don't waste energy thinking about Vieques. Help us get a vote. And then we'll decide if we want the Navy out of Vieques.
Can we?
That he's right.
Let's move.
He's right. If you want the military out of Puerto Rico, let's have the military. Let's vote. Let's have a vote. Will he go for a vote? Let's vote in Puerto Rico.
Let's continue.
You can't win wars with 3% and fighting against the cyclone fence cutting things. What do you mean? That's democracy.
Excuse me. Let's
That's
not.
the issue. That's the issue.
The good part about being Puerto Rican is that we can have a dialogue and then continue. Intense as it is. So, seguimos con respeto, ¿no?
Well, my reaction to the statement by the gentleman is the following. I would not like to view the Vieques issue as a confrontation between the people of Puerto Rico and the people of the United States. The issue in Vieques involves the health of 9,000 American citizens that live in the island of Vieques. That their health has been put in jeopardy, that the continuation of that military exercises in that island affects the quality of life of the people in Vieques. And that is why, for health reasons, for humanitarian reasons, we are moving forward to have the Navy stop the bombing in Vieques. We are committed to the mutual defense and common defense with the United States, but we cannot join forces in favor of common defense if that requires that we put in jeopardy the life of the people in Puerto Rico for the sake of readiness. And that's why it is necessary that we bring these exercises to a halt, and that's why we took the Navy to court 3 weeks ago, asking the judge to order the Navy to stop the bombing. Obviously, there is a federal law that will require a referendum in Vieques in November, and the people in Vieques will vote. And it is reasonably foreseeable that they will vote against the Navy, and the Navy will have to pack their bags and leave. So that will take place in due time. But before that happens, it is necessary and the responsible thing to do for the Navy to stop and make sure they can guarantee that if they will continue their practices prior to November 6th, that it is safe for the people of Vieques, and they have failed their burden of proof, and they should not continue bombing Vieques until they conclude their studies.
Let me address your question finally. Last year we conducted a study in the Senate of Puerto Rico on the intervention of the United States government on the inalienable right of the people of Puerto Rico to their self-determination and decolonization. The FBI volunteered about over 1 million sheets that had been previously classified. Among those that had been previously classified was a speech given by Don Pedro Albizu Campos, that graduate of Harvard Law School that you mentioned before, in 1948 in Vieques. It had been previously deleted, according to the FBI, for national security reasons. So you are absolutely right. The Navy is there not because it wants to protect Puerto Ricans, but because it wants Puerto Rico for war practice. As Don Pedro Albizu Campos said, and by the way, that is why they invaded Puerto Rico and kept it in 1898 without a referendum, without a vote, Doña Miriam. And And in fact, the former governor of Puerto Rico, Rafael Hernandez Colón, whose Secretary of State and Chief of Staff was the present governor of Puerto Rico, back in 1989, subscribed a statement from La Fortaleza in which he admitted that the people of Puerto Rico have never been formally consulted as to their ultimate status desires. So this is an issue of colonialism. And as Don Pedro Albizu Campos said, they are interested in the cage, not in the birds. They are there to protect themselves, and the federal court in Puerto Rico that puts people in jail without bail, without a date certain for trial, for the grievous crime of trespassing, which is legally classified as a petty offense. That federal court is protecting the interests of the Navy, and the Navy is protecting its own interests, not the interests of the people of Puerto Rico. That is why it is an issue of Puerto Rico against the Navy, and you can't hide from that fact.
Let's take. Could you identify yourself and ask directly one of the panelists?
Great. My name is Taylor West. I'm a sophomore at the college, and my question concerns something that Senator Pratz said in his speech, but I'd be honored if El Señor Rodriguez would be the first to respond. Senator Pratt mentioned that only by retaining the Commonwealth status that Puerto Rico has can they effectively solve the problems of injustice such as peace in Vieques. But isn't it true that either statehood or independence would more easily solve that problem by providing official representation or sovereignty?
You want me to answer that first?
Yes, please.
I think that statehood is a drop in the bucket. I think that sovereignty is the only juridical equality that gives us the tools with which to deal with this issue. We are having to deal now with the international community. And the international community has just kicked out the United States of the Human Rights Commission. And it is not. And the issue of what is happening in Vieques is not totally unrelated to that fact. So I think we have to bear in mind that the United States has to cope also with its loss of prestige when it acts as a bully, when it acts tyrannically as it is doing to the people of Puerto Rico in Vieques. So I think that there may be other alternatives that people will want to consider. But as far as I'm concerned, there's only one solution, and that is sovereignty for Puerto Rico.
Well, if the eloquence of my independence colleague would remove the Navy out of Vieques, I encourage him to continue. But the truth of the matter is that the Navy is still in Vieques and the eloquence is still there. And we should find pragmatic solutions to the problem in Vieques. And pragmatic solutions is what our current government is doing, some of which was initiated by the previous government, which is to establish dialogue and exhaust all possible avenues before taking the Navy to court, and that's precisely what we did. We are not in the process of promoting a confrontation between the people of Puerto Rico and the people of the United States. Obviously, that's what your party intends to do with this, assuming that this will generate a support for the independence cause. But that's a theory, and the facts have proven that that theory is incorrect. Look at the election results. Your party, truth of the matter is, got 3% in the past elections. With the Vieques issue and with the eloquence that you presented the Vieques case here. On the other hand, with regards to your question, the people of Puerto Rico have aspirations. Senator Ramirez mentioned that 95% of the people in Puerto Rico cherish their American citizenship. She's right. 95% of the people in Puerto Rico want to have a relationship with the United States. She's right. But the other 95% she forgot is the fact that the people in Puerto Rico are proud to be Puerto Ricans, and that we are proud of our Spanish language. We are proud of our heritage, and that is also an aspiration of the people of Puerto Rico. And how do you accommodate all those aspirations into a political relationship? Can you accommodate them under independence? Cherish American citizenship? Cherish a political relationship with the United States? Obviously not. How can you accommodate those aspirations under statehood? Remaining Puerto Rican, remaining speaking Spanish country, our sense of nationhood? Obviously not. And obviously we have to find an alternative. I'm not implying by this, and I want to be perfectly clear on this, that I'm not totally satisfied with the way our present relationship is structured. I think Commonwealth needs to be updated, and we should move forward with a further status discussion. And perhaps the Institute of Politics here in Harvard can invite us to a debate on status, and I'm sure we will be able to meet again and talk about the status issue. But obviously, we have to accommodate the aspirations of the people of Puerto Rico into a political relationship, and I think Commonwealth suits best the interests of the people of Puerto Rico.
When things start to get very interesting, the time is almost to a close. But this is what I want to propose. If we keep the questions and the responses short, we can have 10 more minutes of dialogue, and I think we should have that.
Hi, my name is Ross Mitchell, and my goal tonight is to ask the shortest question. Let me get into it. I'm new to this topic, and I'm trying to formulate my own opinion, and the way I test topics is by going out to the extreme. So in the extreme, if I'm understanding correctly, in the worst case, this problem goes away by itself in 3 years. So my question to the panelists is, what's the big deal on the one hand, and why is it a big deal on the other?
Okay.
Let's get it.
Okay, that's what I said in my statement, that this thing has all been already agreed to, and the Marine continues with its training because this is part of our national defense. We're talking about, the whole nation, working for the good of the whole nation. And the big issue has been raised because the 3% have joined forces with some of the politicians on the right, on the Commonwealth side, thinking that since they can't get the votes to get independence, they're going to get the United States sufficiently mad at Puerto Rico that they will start pushing it away. Remember, we don't pay taxes, and we get federal funds. And they do demonstrations in other military installations that have nothing to do with Vieques. And one of the statements that Rubén Berrío made was, today Vieques, tomorrow all of Puerto Rico. If you can't get the votes, then you do this type of other agenda or strategy. But that's exactly my question. Why the big deal? Why are we immersed in this? And if these people really feel that all of Puerto Rico want the United States out of there, we don't want the United States there anymore, let's have a vote just on that. Do we want to be part of the United States? Do we want to continue with U.S. citizens, or we want to just break off? And he says we can't be Puerto Rican under statehood. What about this guy talking in Spanish in Harvard? Has he stopped being Puerto Rican from living in Boston, living up here? Come on, we've been 100 years part of the United States and we're still Puerto Rican? How is it going to make any difference if we get to vote for the president and we have representation in Congress? How is that? Is that the way to keep us a colony? That we'll stop being Puerto Rican if we become a state? Come on. People don't want to lose their citizenship. They don't want to lose a permanent relationship with the United States. So what choice do you have? Continue being a colony without a vote? Because we want to stay Puerto Rican?
Let's get more.
Let me, I'm quickly,
Please be brief,
I will be as short as his question. I'm reminded by the debate Ronald Reagan had when he was running for president that he said, here we go again. So here we go again, the same debate. Politics and Vieques, they should not be mixed because at the end of the day, we will be hurting the people of Vieques. The present matter is that we will have to wait 3 years. You're absolutely right. But while we wait those years, the Navy continues to bomb. Last week, they threw 1,500 bombs in Vieques in 4 days, without clearing to the people of Puerto Rico whether or not those military exercises are safe. 7 miles away from the civilian population that were throwing bombs. We have a pressing urgency in resolving this matter.
Let me just say that it makes them happy to say we're 3%. We're more, but I'm not going to debate that. I'm not even going to discuss it, because moral issues are not an issue of numbers. Like slavery, colonialism is immoral and illegal already. So I think that what we need to do is resolve the moral issues here. The problem here is that you have not taken the extreme situation. The extreme situation is not that it goes away by itself in 2 years, or 3 years, or 1.5 years, or whatever it is. The problem is that the Navy has lied constantly, and there's no reason to trust the Navy that it wants to go away or that it will go away. The biggest lie is that there's absolutely no other place on the face of the planet where they can bomb to their heart's content. The fact of the matter is that for a whole year, the exercises were suspended because of Rubén Berríos and other people's presence in the firing range, and the defense of the United States did not come tumbling down. The fact of the matter is that whether we are 3% or 5% or 10% or whatever percent, 4 senators in Mr. Pratz's party were arrested last weekend, including the Vice President of the Senate, a woman. The fact is that the Vice President of Mrs. Ramirez's party was also arrested in civil disobedience and imprisoned for doing civil disobedience in Vieques. The fact is that the number is growing, and it was over 200 people when it was only at first Rubén Berríos. Now this number is growing. I think that what we're dealing with here is a people who have been powerless. The courts have failed, the legislation has failed, the dialogue has failed. The only resource, peaceful resort, is civil disobedience, and it has to be peaceful.
Don't forget, 5 citizens from Vieques.
One more question, very brief, and we'll
Hi.
finish.
I'm a second-year student here at the Kennedy School. My question is the following. Senator Pratz mentioned earlier that there's a consensus on the island, that they want the military to get off the island. My question to you is, how do you explain that 4,000 of the 9,000 residents on the island want this Navy to stay there? And more importantly, how do you explain that the mother of the civilian that was accidentally killed, the only person that has died in the 40 years the Navy has been there, how do you explain that his own mother, is in favor of the Navy being on the island?
Well, we have 9,000 residents living in Vieques. I don't know where the 4,000 number it's taken from. Public opinion polls in Puerto Rico and in Vieques show that a significant number of Viequenses will vote overwhelmingly for the Navy to get out. I will be shocked, not to say surprised, that the people in Vieques will vote otherwise. This has not only become a quest for peace in Vieques, but a quest for peace for Puerto Rico. And we have to take a vote, and the vote will take place in November, and we will see after November what happens. But I have no doubt in my mind, in my heart, and from what I've seen in Vieques, I visited Vieques on many occasions, that the people in Vieques want peace. It's difficult to imagine who would be against improving their quality of life, who would be against peace, and that's what we want for Vieques.
The 4,000 are individually signed petitions with their name, social security, and address of citizens of Vieques. They have organized and made a committee there, and they are already by 4,000 individual signatures asking for the Navy to stay.
Let me just say, not to create a debate here, but there's about 4,000 registered voters in Vieques. So you're saying the Navy has 100% support in Vieques? No. It's hard to imagine. In fact, the mayor of Vieques belongs to my party, and his whole campaign was focused on getting the Navy out. So,
in the answer to your question about David Sanes' mother, that's her perfect right. I mean, you know, she is his mother, and she decided that she would support the Navy. You know, she has a right to do that. The rest of the family is not necessarily in agreement with that. Haven't you had disagreements with your mother?
Her brother, his brother, the only person in his family that's not with the Navy is one sister.
Well, my mother is for statehood and my sister for independence.
You'll grow.
It happens in the best of families.
On that note that I think captures our dilemma, I want to thank Senator Roberto Pratz,
Thank you.
Senator Miriam Ramirez, and former Senator Manuel Rodriguez Orellana. And I want to thank all of you for coming, and clearly we have to continue talking. So after this, we can continue somewhere. Thank you for coming.